Good evening, everyone. Tonight, I want to show you how to think clearly, not as a scientist, not as a doctor, but as everyday human being. I am Dr. Senthil Kumar Tyagarajan. I have been working as a consultant psychiatrist in the United Kingdom for the past 25 years. First, I want to thank Harish and Inaya Thozhar for organizing the event and giving me this opportunity and platform. As a psychiatrist, I believe I carry not only a clinical responsibility, but also a social responsibility to promote scientific thinking and rational inquiry across the society. That is why I'm going to speak today on the topic of art of thinking clearly and developing a scientific frame of mind. Before we all go into the topic, we need to understand the difference between two things, art and science. Art is nothing but human way of understanding our own life. It is very subjective. It deals with emotions. It values the meaning and it has lots of misinterpretation and interpretations. But on the other hand, science is a disciplined way of understanding reality. It replaces belief with evidence, emotions with reasons, opinion with methods. Science also asks only one question: what is true and how do we know it? Both art and science are essential for our life, but tonight the focus will be only on science, science, and science only on science. Good. Scientific thinking is not limited to only for the experts. It belongs to almost every citizen, children, adult, professionals, non professionals alike. It must be cultivated as a habit, not memorized as a subject. And each and every government throughout the world should encourage people, their own citizens, to think only in scientific way. To develop this habit, we must first learn how to think clearly. So, how do we train our mind to think clearly and scientifically almost on everyday basis? I use a very simple model. It's a four frame of clear thinking. You know, imagine how you see this world. From birth to death, we see the world through our eyes. Even with the binocular vision, what we see is a circular frame. When you see the outside world, you see a circular frame with no clear boundaries. This often gives us a very vague and unstructured understanding of reality. But imagine looking yourself into the world through a window, a squared window or a rectangular framed window. Suddenly, reality becomes structured, defined, and easier to analyze. I will use this ideology of window frame to explain four frames that help us develop scientific frame of mind. Here are the four frames. First, you should have a mindset to have patience and persistence. Second, the courage to question each and everything. Third, developing scientific temper. Fourth, identify and keeping superstitious beliefs away from yourself. The first frame is the patient and persistence of a persistent mind setup. Scientific thinking does not reward impatience. Truth rarely appears instinctively. It requires the ability to tolerate uncertainty, to wait, to observe repeatedly, and to persist even when the answers are not immediately available to us. The second frame is the courage to question each and everything. I learned this from Periyar, Ambedkar, Kalaignar, and many leaders like where I lived in South India. Science begins at the moment we stop accepting simply ideas because they are popular, traditional, or emotionally comforting. Questioning is not disrespect, it is just intellectual honesty, I would say. The third frame is the very important frame, which is the scientific temper frame. A habit of scientific temper is nothing but a habit, the way you think, the way of thinking that relies on methodology rather than belief. This is the most important frame, and I will discuss this in detail in next few minutes. The fourth frame is the ability to identify the superstition and keep it away from our distance at a distance. Superstition often distinguishes itself as if it has got culture, faith, tradition, religious, putting all the sheets behind it. But scientific thinking requires us to recognize these influences and prevent them from interfering our rational judgments. When these four frames work together, thinking becomes clear, stable, and evidence based. Today, I will focus on the third frame, scientific temper. Scientific temper, as I said, is not about getting degrees from the colleges or your own intelligence. It is just an attitude of the mind. People do get confused what is attitude. An attitude is simply a habitual way of thinking. Whatever you are thinking daily, if it becomes habit, that becomes attitude. How your mind responds automatically to any situation. Scientific temper means your mind is trained to look for clarity before reacting. We can make it practically with four steps, which I call look for clarity. Look, LOOK. It has got four letters in it. So that are all the things which you need to think. Okay. The first step is to collect the information. This means gathering information without interpretation. At this stage, there is no opinion, no judgment, only observation. The second step is to arrange the collected facts in chronological order. Understanding the sequence gives you meaning for the facts, knowing what happened first and what happened followed that. The third step is to identify relative significance and the impact of this collected evidence. Not all facts carry equal importance. According to scientific thinking, it requires recognizing what truly matters rather than giving equal weightage to everything. The fourth and most difficult step is to keep personal feelings aside and decide. Like you should not put your own emotional feelings while taking decision. This is where the science separates itself from belief. Decisions are made based on evidence, not emotions, identity, fear, or loyalty. When this method is consistently applied, thinking automatically becomes scientific. That's why I call this as attitude and a habitual way of thinking. I will repeat the steps in very short sentences. One, collect the facts, arrange them in chronological order, identify what matters most and its impact, keep personal feelings aside and decide. These are all the four things which you need to remember. This is the core scientific thinking. If you remember this, you're already entered into a scientific world. Once when you practice these four steps regularly, you will begin to see the world of a big spectrum. Science on one end, superstitious on the other end. Gradually, you will realize that your own unexplained superstitious belief often acts as a speed breaker to the scientific thinking, your own scientific thinking. If you patiently apply these four steps, superstitious will not disappear suddenly, but it will be constantly questioned, weakened, and eventually dismantled. And in the end, science will prevail. Well, the scientific thinking does not just benefit. If you see what is the benefits of the scientific thinking when if you're having this habitual thinking, it does not just benefit individual yourself. It transforms the entire society. When science is present in the human mind, in your mind, people become more tolerant, less resistive, and more humane. Scientific thinking reduces your own fear, prejudice, and blind obedience. It promotes dialogue, reasoning, rather than belief system. Uh, a society guided by scientific temper values evidence over rumors, reason over anger, and welfare over ideology. This indirectly or directly increases the social stability and collective happiness. I heard in Australia, Mr. Harish Thodar was discussing about collective happiness, how each country has different type of happiness index. When science increases, happiness increases. That's how it becomes. That is the statistical data. That is why science strengthens democracy, human rights, and social justice. It helps individuals see themselves not as an isolated beings, but as a responsible members of rational society as together. When science lives in your mind, the society becomes stable. That's why we call science strengthens society. That is a wording called science strengthens society. Okay. Let me give a very simple example, my own medical examples, which I daily practice. Okay. A child comes to comes to see me in a clinic, let us assume a child is coming with a fever. Okay. I do not panic. I do not guess. I do not really do anything influenced by my own belief. What I do is, as a doctor, I do not immediately react to the word fear. Sorry, fear of the parents or the fear of myself or the word fever. Okay, so I do not react to anything. I begin by collecting facts, like, for example, what is the temperature? How was it measured? How long has the fever been present? And whether there is any associated symptoms such as nausea, vomiting, coughing, skin rashes, pain, or I can even go into the depth asking whether there is any recent travel to different countries. At this stage, I am not making any judgment. I am only gathering information as such. This is called fact collection or collecting the facts. Okay, looking for the facts, the first factor. Next, I arrange these facts in chronological order. I ask further question when the fever started, what symptoms appeared first, whether the cough came before or after the fever, and how the illness progressed over the time. This sequence gives meaning to all the facts which I have collected. This is the second step. Then the third step is I identify what matters the most. Some symptoms carry more clinical importance when compared to the others. For example, breathing difficulty is far more significant when there is a mild vomiting. Okay. And persistent high fever matters more when compared to brief spike of temperatures. Here, I assess the impact, not emotions of the patient, baby, or not the emotions of the parents also. I just assess the impact of the symptoms. Finally, I decide by keeping my personal feelings aside. I do not treat the child based on the anxiety, assumptions, or family pressure. I purely decide on medical evidence and with go with scientific reasons. This is how science works in medicine. I do it daily when I'm seeing my patients. This becomes a habit for me and I enjoy it. So now when I come to my home, I do the same. Everything looks science for me, even switching on the TVs, talking to my wife, talking to my kids, talking to my friends, everything becomes scientific for me. Even when I'm listening to music, I use science for all this analysis purpose. So let me give you another few examples and apply to this steps to the daily life. This method is not limited to medicine alone. As I discuss now for the next few examples, you will see this is not just limited to medicine alone. It applies equal to over every day of our life. For example, many of us has watched several news channels for a few minutes every morning. One channel might leave us calm, another channel might trigger us angry, or no, sometimes we feel hatred or become anxious. Instead of reacting emotionally, apply the same four steps which I told you. Observe the facts presented, notice the order in which information is delivered, identify which details are emphasized, and then ask yourself why your emotions are triggered. You will now slowly start beginning to see the difference between information and manipulation from the channels you have watched. That's all is required. I'll give you another example. Think about how often you check your mobile phones each day. Ask yourself, are you checking it for work or for learning or purely out of habit? When you apply the four steps, you will easily understand your own behavior scientifically rather than judging yourself emotionally. Okay. I will give you another example. Consider a small disagreement with your family members, like your wife, brothers, sisters at home. Instead of blaming each others, collect what happened actually. Arrange the events in order. Identify what truly mattered for you, and then decide without emotional bias. Very often, you realize that your own emotional responses, not the event itself, cause the tension. That's all is required. Even questions, very simple questions, like whether you are a selfish person or a humanistic person, can be examined scientifically. How? Just observe yourself how often you use the word I compared to we or us. Okay, if you calculate the frequency of usage of I and us, will reflect the data by itself will reflect who you are. When analyzed objectively, it gives insight into your own mindset. That's all is required. Finally, let me leave you with a small message. Scientific thinking does not make you cold. Does not make you rigid. It actually frees you. It makes you feel freedom, free from fear, free from blind belief, free to think, question, and decide with clarity. Okay, so scientific thinking is not subject to study or getting a degree from universities. It is just a practice habit. Every day it can be used every day. It can be practiced every day in every situation. What I wanted to tell is it can be used while almost every seconds in your life. Our message from Pearl at Oxford is simply, I wanted to give it as a simple and powerful for only four messages. Collect the facts, order the events, identify what matters the most, keep feeling aside and decide. If you do this consistently, superstitious will gradually lose its grip, rationality will strengthen, and humanity will move forward. That's all is my discussion. I hope this discussion is helpful for you. Just remember four things apply on almost daily basis. Now I'm going to give the platform to Harish Thorer, and his topic is bias, an arch enemy of scientific temper. Thank you.